Coming up, primary season has finally arrived. It all starts with the Iowa Caucus tonight. Citrus TV reporter Brandon Ross joins us from Des Moines with the latest on the race.
And Governor Andrew Cuomo announces 2 new officials will be joining the Climate Action Council. What New York State is planning to do to tackle climate change.
And the impeachment trial enters into its closing days. Where the nation stands at the end of it all. Talking Points starts right now. Exciting day for political news. Primary season is officially here, and candidates for the Democratic presidential nomination get their first crack at landing delegates with the Iowa Caucus tonight. Good evening, I'm Sabrina Maggiore.
And I'm Conor Wight. The field started with more than 20 candidates vying for the right to take on President Trump. Now, 11 are hoping to pick up momentum with a strong showing in Iowa.
Former Vice President Joe Biden, Senator Bernie Sanders, and former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg are the best positioned candidates in the state. 41 delegates are up for grabs, and Citrus TV reporter Brandon Ross is live from a Pete Buttigieg event in Des Moines with the latest developments.
Sabrina, the first Democratic candidate entered the presidential race back in July of 2017, and tonight we have finally made it to primary season 2020. Every candidate has made their blitz over weekend, especially those senators in the impeachment trial, making that final pitch and at least get on the voters' minds, because you don't have to finish first in Iowa for a couple of reasons. One, this is not a primary state. This is a caucus state. This is not a direct vote. What happens is everyone gathers in their polling place at 7 p.m. Central, either their local high school or their elementary school or library. They get split off into their groups of what candidates they support. At the outset, there will be a segment for undecided voters. Then what happens is there's 30 minutes of conversations between the people there trying to convince other people to join their side. After those 30 minutes, they reorganize, and then a viability threshold is enforced. If any candidate doesn't reach 15% of precinct goers, then they are eliminated, and there's another 30 minutes on the clock for those who have met the threshold to convince others to join their camp. Once that 30 minutes is up, they split up. Those numbers get reported to the state Democratic Caucus. And then the second reason it's important is Iowa is not a winner-take-all state. What happens is at the end, all the results get reported, and it can be a split vote. You can finish in second or third and still get delegates. We saw this back in 2016, where Hillary Clinton won the Iowa caucus, but oh so slightly, to the point where she got 23 delegates, and Bernie Sanders, who finished a very close second, got just 21.
Now, Brandon, obviously a lot of candidates are looking to get a running start in primary season tonight, whether that looks like a win or a strong delegate count. What are the polling numbers showing right now?
As of right now, Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont is in the lead in Iowa in most recent polling. He has a little bit of a cushion over former Vice President Joe Biden in second, and then most polls show former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg in third place. And that has been fluctuating throughout the race. It could very well be a Biden first place finish, but then for Mayor Buttigieg in particular, it's important to get in that top 3, maybe even that top 2, because if he doesn't get good momentum into New Hampshire and the rest of the pack, he might soon fall out of the race, and this may just become a Biden and Bernie show. Reporting from Lincoln High School in Des Moines, Iowa, Brandon Ross, Citrus TV.
Brandon Ross, thank you. Now, back in June, New York State, with the support of Governor Andrew Cuomo, passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which created the Climate Action Council. This council is tasked with creating a plan to radically reduce emissions in New York State. On Friday, the governor announced the appointment of 2 new officials to the 22-member council. Talking Points contributor Oscar Offerman is now in studio to break down how these appointments will affect the state. Oscar?
Thanks, Connor. Now, on Friday, Governor Andrew Cuomo announced the appointments of SUNY Empire State College President Jim Malatras and former State Parks Commissioner Rose Harvey to the New York State Climate Action Council. Now, Malatras is a longtime aide to Governor Cuomo, who became president of SUNY Empire State back in May. Harvey stepped down from her post in November of 2018 after serving as State Parks Commissioner for Governor Cuomo's first 2 terms. Now, these appointments follow 3 other appointments earlier in the month by New York State Democrats. All of these actions by Cuomo and Democrats in the state legislature, by the way, are part of Governor Cuomo's Green New Deal. Now, the Climate Council is drawing up a plan to reduce emissions levels by 85% from 1990 levels by the year 2050. Now, the state is looking to completely decarbonize its electricity supply, as well as invest more in offshore wind and solar energy. Now, the council will have until January of 2022 to have a framework in place to achieve these goals.
Now, Oscar, you mentioned some of the credentials of these two new appointees. How are they specifically going to impact the council once they join?
Now, let's start with Jim Millatras. He's a former Cuomo aide, as I mentioned earlier. Now, during his time with Cuomo, he was Cuomo's policy guru, so he helped out with all those policies. In fact, he helped draft this very same climate proposal last year, so he's really going to be Cuomo's ally on the council. Now, Rose Harvey, she's a former state parks commissioner. Now, while she was commissioner for Cuomo's first 2 terms, she worked on the Parks 2020 improvement campaign, and they saw a large increase in park visitation while she was in the post. So really a large wealth of experience is being brought to this council, as well as a key Cuomo ally.
Now, Oscar, on the federal level, we're seeing the Trump administration rolling back a lot of climate protections. How much of this Cuomo's plan do you think is a reaction to what Trump is doing on the federal level?
So I want to preface this answer with a quote from the New York State Senate Majority Leader, Andrea Stewart Cousins. Now, she says, with Trump and his allies denying climate change and rolling back environmental protections, it's up to New York to step up and lead. So that really says all you really need to know. Trump obviously pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. He's reduced funding for programs such as the EPA. He's also advocated for coal energy in the past. So really this rubbed New York State Senate Democrats the wrong way, and that's why we're in this situation.
Now, Oscar, quickly, how can you pinpoint how this is going to impact New York State?
Well, obviously they're looking for an 85% reduction in 1990 emissions levels by the year 2050. Now, this is going to require large investments in wind and solar energy, and they're looking to completely decarbonize their energy supply. So really this is going to be a large, groundbreaking effort.
Oscar Offerman, thank you very much. The impeachment trial of President Donald Trump is now in its final phase and will conclude on Wednesday. After over 4 months, the impeachment saga is coming to a close, as closing arguments in the trial against the president began earlier today. Here to break down the impeachment trial is Talking Points analyst Spencer Queskin. Now, Spencer, obviously this has been a long trial. There's been a lot happening. Can you sort of give us the main highlights? What's happened?
So, this entire saga started with Ukraine, and when the President Donald Trump made a phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. In that call, he talked about Joe Biden, and then later on, he also withheld around $400 million of aid to Ukraine, which he later released. This prompted, in September, a whistleblower to come out against the president. And then on September 24th, we had Nancy Pelosi announcing the inquiry into the president. In October, the witnesses testified in private, and in November, those testimonies became public, with key figures such as Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch and Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman being key players. Then, in December, on the 3rd of December, we had a 13-9 party split for the final report of impeachment. On the 4th, the hearings began in the House, and on the 18th, both articles passed on party lines, with no Republicans voting for either article. And this is when Trump was officially impeached by the House. Now, moving on to the Senate, in January, we had on the 15th, the articles were sent from the House to the Senate. And then on the 22nd through the 24th, the prosecution made their arguments. On the 25th through the 28th, the defense made theirs. And then on January 31st, the organizing resolution by Mitch McConnell was passed in the Senate in order to conclude the trial.
Now, Spencer, we heard closing arguments today. How is the Senate looking to conclude this trial?
The Senate actually started to conclude the trial way back on Friday. That's when the conclusion started, with a vote to say there would be no more witnesses and no more documents subpoenaed within the Senate. Today, as you just said, the closing arguments wrapped up in the Senate. And then tomorrow and on Wednesday, the senators are going to give various speeches, which are going to be either for or against impeachment. And then Wednesday at 4 o'clock is the critical vote. That's when they're going to vote for either removing the president from office or acquitting him of the charges.
And we've known for a while that acquittal in the Senate seemed likely. Do you think that's how it's ultimately going to play out?
At this moment, it seems very, very likely that the Senate is going to acquit the president. It seems unlikely that Democrats are going to get 2/3, around 20 Republicans, needed to remove the president from office, as they were unable to get 4 Republicans in there to call witnesses.
Well, acquittal or not, obviously this is going to have a big impact on the 2020 election going forward, and we'll have to see how that plays out. Spencer Queskin, thank you so much. Coming up, the nation is preparing for President Donald Trump's 3rd State of the Union in the midst of his impeachment trial. We'll tell you what to expect.
The latest peace talks between Israel and Palestine are quickly starting to fall apart. More on where those discussions stand when we come back.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes? B, console her.
Don't worry, sweetie. This is gonna happen a lot.
Or C, find her a new boyfriend.
Nice single boys. That was weird.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President, members of Congress, honored guests, my fellow Americans. Tonight I have the honor of reporting to you on the State of the Union. Let me begin by saluting the new Speaker of the House and thanking him, especially tonight, for extending an invitation to two guests sitting in the gallery with Mrs. Hastert.
We just heard President Clinton during his 1999 impeachment trial. President Donald Trump is expected to stand before Congress tomorrow for his third State of the Union address. We're seeing some parallels there in the midst of his impeachment trial. The president is due to speak before a joint session of Congress, including those expected to vote this Wednesday on whether to remove him from office. Joining us in studio now to discuss is Talking Points analyst Augustus LeRoux. Now, Gus, we know that this impeachment trial has sort of loomed over the Trump presidency, especially this last year. How do you think it's going to affect his State of the Union address tomorrow?
Well, you know, there is a lot of speculation about it. In all likelihood, we're not going to see a large impact on the State of the Union address, however. It does tend to be unique among a lot of Trump's usual speeches. In fact, White House officials actually did come out and say it was unlikely that Trump would address it. As you just saw in Bill Clinton's State of the Union address, he similarly tended to ignore it throughout his address, focusing more so on the pertinent State of the Union itself.
Now, we've addressed the elephant in the room, which of course would be impeachment, but what other topics are you expecting President Trump to touch on during the State of the Union address?
Well, it's important to remember right now that Trump is really just kicking off his 2020 campaign right now. It's in full gear. We are more than likely going to see the president delve into the accomplishments of his current administration. We're more than likely going to hear reference to the current economic situation towards unemployment rates, lowest in 49 years, lowest African-American unemployment, lowest Hispanic unemployment. We're definitely going to see some talk about the economy as well as security. More than likely we're going to hear about affairs in the Middle East. The killing of General Soleimani is sure to come up, among other things, of course.
And this is President Trump's third State of the Union address. Based on the previous two, are there certain things we can anticipate in terms of rhetoric, how he might sort of address this?
Well, I think we're definitely starting to see some patterns right here. Most unusual is that Trump does seem to tend to use the State of the Union as almost a platform to launch new proposals. His first State of the Union back in 2018, he used to launch the proposal of a $1.5 trillion infrastructure project. Now, of course, that was not successful. But then in 2019, again, he proposed paid family leave. And then now in 2020, we can certainly expect another similar proposal to be brought forward on the State of the Union.
Now, we know historically with the State of the Union there is a partisan reaction in the crowd. Likely Republicans will be clapping, Democrats not so much. But we also know that they're preparing some sort of a rebuttal to the State of the Union address tomorrow night. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's right. And it's also kind of become a tradition within the Democratic Party to prepare a rebuttal or response, as they call it, to the State of the Union. This year actually has been nominated is Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who was actually recognized by Amy Klobuchar at the last Democratic debate. She was selected by Nancy Pelosi to deliver the address to rebut any of the points the president may bring up at the State of the Union address.
Well, we'll have to see what is actually said tomorrow night. Augustus LeRoux, thank you so much. It's been a week since President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced their proposed Israel-Palestine peace plan. what the plan will mean for the countries, we will have to see what that means for the countries involved. Here to tell us more is Talking Points analyst Natalie Fahmy. Now, Natalie, as we said, it's been a week. What can you tell us about how this peace plan has actually developed?
Okay, so Trump released the peace plan. It's about 181 pages long, so it's very thorough, very long. It's made up of many sections and parts. What we see in the peace plan are plans for the Gaza Strip, plans for the West Bank for security, and it goes into a lot of detail about how this is going to play out economically for the countries involved as well.
And when we look at the actual proposals here, how are these proposals going to affect both Israel and Palestine?
Okay, so for Israel, the big thing is the United States is going to recognize the Israeli settlements on the occupied West Bank. And then for Palestine, the United States is calling for the creation of a demilitarized Palestinian state. Another big thing about this plan is that it's not going to call for uprooting any Israeli or Palestinian residents.
Now, the U.S. and Israel are historically very strong allies. We've seen charges in the past that the U.S. is perhaps too biased towards the Israeli position on this issue. How has Palestine reacted?
Palestine is not reacting very well. Actually, the president of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, came out and he said that this plan is nonsense. And upon the release of the plan, he actually severed security ties with Israel and Palestine. So it looks like the plan is not going to be proceeding forward. Palestine is not having a very positive reaction towards it.
Trump has long touted this peace plan as something that he could get done. What do you think this is going to mean for the U.S. moving forward? What does this plan entail?
So for the United States, if this plan is to proceed and is to go forward, it's going to mean that there's going to be some new trade agreements coming with Palestine, and it's also going to be strengthening relations with Palestine and Israel. Trump also sees this as a historic opportunity for the United States. We can take a listen to what he says.
An independent state of their very own. This vision for peace is fundamentally different from past proposals. Palestinians will be able to seize the new future with dignity, self-sufficiency, and national pride.
So as we can see, this is going to strengthen relations with Israel, but right now, Palestine and the United States are still on the rocks.
Natalie Fahmy, thank you so much. Coming up, County Executive Ryan McMahon appoints the first ever Chief Diversity Officer. What this means for Onondaga County.
And President Obama's U.S. waterway regulations are about to be overturned. We'll fill you in on the EPA rollback. Stick around.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
We have breaking news ahead of the Iowa Caucus tonight. Over the weekend, the Des Moines Register scrapped its scheduled poll due to errors by one of its interviewers. Now, 538 has reported that the results of the poll would have shown if published.
Bernie Sanders is in the lead with 22%, but most notably, Elizabeth Warren is in second place with 18%. Former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg is close behind in third, while former Vice President Joe Biden is in fourth. This is a surprising result since Biden has been shown in second consistently, and we said it there, it is very surprising. Biden has been polling pretty high there.
It is, but the other results, Bernie Sanders being in the lead, I think that's more or less expected, and we'll have to see what that means for other candidates. Klobuchar not showing up in the top four, which some might have considered a death sentence a little while ago, but she came out and said earlier today, or even yesterday, that she's moving on to New Hampshire no matter what.
We'll have to see what that happens there. On Tuesday, Onondaga County legislators will vote to confirm a nominee for the county's new Chief Diversity Officer position. County Executive Ryan McMahon has nominated former six-term county legislator Monica Williams for the position.
Williams retired from county office back in December after 12 years of representing Syracuse's South Side. She was first elected to county office back in 2007 to represent the 16th district. She announced last year she wouldn't seek re-election, and her son, Vernon Williams Jr., ran for the seat and won.
If confirmed in the new post, Monica Williams will oversee the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. It's a new department of county government that was created in the 2020 budget. The office was created as part of McMahon's plan to boost minority employment in the county workforce, something he stated was a goal soon after he took office as county executive last year.
In Williams' new role, she will be helping to recruit minority candidates as well as encouraging them to take civil service exams. The goal, to increase minorities in the workforce to 20% by 2022.
And Connor, that's something that's not necessarily a new goal for the county. Former county executive Joni Mahoney actually had that as a goal of hers as well.
And we saw some of the work she did there. She removed some language that impeded other people from being able to take on work that then opened it up, but we didn't see specific percentages there. We now have a set goal of 20%, so we'll have to see if they can hit that mark.
Absolutely.
14 states in Washington, D.C. are suing the EPA. Last week, the Trump administration rolled back Obama-era amendments to the chemical disaster rule. Those amendments were designed to prevent chemical plants from releasing toxic chemicals into the air. This included requiring steps like stricter emergency preparedness guidelines and analysis of safety technology.
The 14 states are almost all led by Democratic attorney generals, including the state of New York. Attorney General Letitia James says that the Trump administration is rolling back critical protections against explosions, fires, and poisonous gas, and that she's suing to protect over 9 million New Yorkers.
Now, Sabrina, those 14 states, by and large, are led by Democratic attorney generals, and we know that attorney general lawsuits are often political, but that's not always the case. Lawsuits against the EPA under the Trump administration have, for the most part, been losses for the administration, and they've had to pay up.
Right, and you know, what's interesting is, with all of these lawsuits, we are not necessarily sure what's going to happen. A lot of this is going to hinge on whether or not President Trump is reelected in 2020. None of this could matter if he doesn't get the nom, because many presidential Democratic candidates have said that they're going to roll this back.
Right. And moving on to another big issue ahead of 2020, the Trump administration is expanding the travel ban to 6 new countries. According to the acting Secretary of Homeland Security, the U.S. will no longer give out visas to nationals from the 6 countries seen on your screen: Eritrea, Kyrgyzstan, Nigeria, Sudan, Myanmar, and Tanzania. They joined 7 original countries in President Trump's 2017 travel ban.
According to the New York Times, the expansion will affect 1.2 billion people. Reuters reports that Homeland Security says the countries added to the ban did not meet U.S. standards for information security. Democrats and left-leaning organizations have already responded, including presidential candidates. Senator Elizabeth Warren called the move, quote, racist and xenophobic. Former Vice President Joe Biden said it was a disgrace.
On Friday, the Trump administration also announced a travel ban related to the coronavirus. Foreign nationals that have recently traveled to China will temporarily be unable to enter the United States. That measure began just yesterday on February 2nd. Now, Sabrina, the coronavirus has become a bit more of a problem here in the United States, at least by governmental standards. We saw the Department of Health place a national security risk on that, on the spread of coronavirus here.
Exactly, and just yesterday we saw our first non-China related death in the Philippines. It's definitely something that nations are being very cautious about. They're trying to contain the virus as best as they can.
And as we see people coming in, potentially from China, as diplomats and other people are being flown back in from China, we know that there's at least 11 airports or so that have specifically been sectioned to quarantine these people coming back in.
Right. Taking all possible precautions there. And when we come back, we'll sit down with Bond Photos to talk about how the UK is doing since Brexit last week. Stick around.
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have prediabetes. Big time.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes? B, console her?
Don't worry, sweetie. This is gonna happen a lot.
Or C, find her a new boyfriend?
Nice single boys. That was weird.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Come on, it's not that hard.
My big man fingers are having a problem with these little tiny buttons.
Whoa, watch it there. Your blood pressure's gonna go through the roof.
Tell me about it. I'm trying to learn how to get it down. Instead, it keeps going up.
High blood pressure can increase the risk for heart attack or stroke. Learn how to keep yours at a healthy range.
Ever hear a voice command? Just say text barbershop to 97779.
That's not what I said.
Just give me that. Now my blood pressure's up.
It has now been 3 days since the UK left the European Union in the historic Brexit deal. As the nation treads into unknown waters, the question of what will happen next continues to take center stage. Here to shed some light on the issue is Talking Points analyst Bond Photos. Now, Bond, there's some technical aspects here. They technically aren't all the way out of the European Union as we understand it. Would you be able to tell us what the actual status of the UK is at the moment?
So as of January 31st, they have relinquished their right to vote in any type of European Union election. However, they are still part of the European Union as they will follow the regulations. They are also following along with paying into the budget. And finally, they are still part of the European Union's trade bloc.
And the European Union is this complex, multi-governmental body. What does this mean with the UK's relationship, political relationship with Europe?
So politically, they're still going to kind of, in a way, set up a border. They're wanting to put a trade border in between Northern Ireland and the UK. However, this is, in a way, dividing the country, which could also lead to a divide between the entirety of Scotland, Wales, which might break up the United Kingdom. Another option of putting the border would be between the two islands. However, this would cause a rise and possibly another trouble. And another place to put the border was simply just around the United Kingdom and leaving the United Kingdom inside the European Union.
Now, a lot of those border issues that you mentioned rest on trade and economics. What can you tell us about what we should expect economically from the UK going forward?
So economically, the UK is going to have to figure out exactly what type of economic relations it will have. With the European Union, it has to figure out exactly how is the trade going to occur. As I said earlier, they're probably going to put the trade border between Ireland and the entire rest of the United Kingdom. However, they also have to figure out trade with other countries as they're no longer part of the European bloc. The United States, especially a major trade partner of the United Kingdom, will also have to figure out its relations.
So you're talking about the U.S.'s potential relationship with the U.K. What could that relationship look like economically? What sort of trade deals are sort of being negotiated now? Tell us a bit about that.
So the trade deals probably will figure around the entirety of the United Kingdom being not exactly agricultural, but more economic in the sense of industry. So the United States is going to sell a lot more of its more economic product of corn, wheat, cotton, while the European Union is going to focus on the industry, and with the UK more separated, they're going to focus more on the products that they sell, predominantly mostly industrial.
Now, we'll have to see how this all turns out, especially that border issue is going to be a big question about. It's going to affect the economy in Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, and Wales, so we'll really have to see where that border falls and what that means politically. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's all the time we have on Talking Points tonight. For more content and webisodes, be sure to visit CitrusTV.com/talkingpoints. I'm Sabrina Maggiore.
And I'm Conor Wight. Have a great night, Syracuse.